Welcome to Mentoring in Real Life, where we talk about what it takes to find and be a great mentor. I'm Angela, and together with my co-host Bill, we know the power of mentoring and what it can do in your life on both sides of the table. If you're interested in learning tips, tricks, and hearing stories about mentoring, you're in the right place. Come join us. Hi, Bill. How you doing?
Never been this happy. How about you?
I am great. Thank you for asking.
Well, glad to hear it. So for today, we wanted to address an issue that we've heard sort of repetitively from folks that says, my company doesn't have a mentoring program. And I would just say from our experience, most organizations that we've talked to don't have formalized mentoring programs. And the ones that do have them don't seem to be particularly effective. So how critical is it that your company has or implements formalized mentoring? If there's no formal program, what do you do next? How do you find a great mentor? How do you find great mentees? And so in our experience, you don't need a formalized mentoring program with big bureaucratic structures to have an effective mentoring approach for your organization. As with any set of goals, it's the behaviors that count much more than any policy that somebody sets. And establishing a culture that values growing future leaders driven by behaviors that result in effective mentoring is an approach that can thrive irrespective of any of the formalized mentoring approaches. Certainly in the organization from which we came, we did not have a formalized bureaucratic mentoring system. I thought it was actually pretty effective that they put mentoring as an evaluation criteria for more senior people, so that in each one of your annual assessments with your boss, you needed to tell people how you were doing mentoring and how, who you were mentoring and what you were doing with those folks, which drove that behavior. Now you're evaluating me on it. Sure. Now I'm paying attention, but there was no big there weren't a lot of forms to fill out and there wasn't that much structure to it other than defining what we said a minute ago. You're emphasizing the fact that we care about growing leaders in the organization. So in today's podcast, we're going to take a top-down approach to the question, try and give both perspectives, a mentor who's thinking about the legacy that he or she will leave, and ensuring the organization will have solid leadership development tracks for the high potential employees and the mentee who is interested in growing and or building his or her career. We'll go through how to define what you want, where you should be looking for mentors and mentees, how to reach out, and maybe some specific ways to build the relationship.
That's a great intro to what we're going to be talking about today, Bill, because I think especially when we're calling this episode the DIY mentoring, right? Do it yourself. How do you do it yourself? How do you find great mentees? How do you find great mentors? That's certainly what you and I have had to roll up our sleeves and do our entire careers. So let's talk about how we did it.
Absolutely. I thought it was frankly, the do-it-yourself approach actually was a little bit more effective, in my opinion. And in talking to folks from the large organizations, it when it happens organically, it's typically much more natural, and people are doing it because they're intrinsically motivated to do so.
Mhm.
So, if you're a mentor and you're looking for mentees, what kind of questions do you ask yourself? Well, what skills are you trying to grow inside your company, or would you like to see grown in the industry? Where do you see the need for talent over the next 5 years? Uh, then after that, well, so how many am I willing to take on if I'm going to be a mentor? I would recommend maybe 1 to 2 hours per month per person, unless you set up some sort of a mentoring group. So that's going to bound any senior leader with how many people they can take on. But it still is manageable and it's very reasonable. And as we've said for a while now, really, really important for you to be building those leaders. And so you need to ask what resources you can leverage to provide the materials to mentees and what are your favorite development resources? What did you do as you grew your career that you could now pass on to your mentees? So the overall mentor's view, how about the mentee's view?
Well, when you're a mentee looking for mentors, the first thing you want to do is define what you want from a mentor, right? So before you start looking, clarify why you want a mentor. Ask yourself, what specific skills or career areas do I want to grow in? Write them down so that when you're having conversations with prospective mentors, you've got a particular reminder of what it is that you're looking to grow in your own self. Identify Do I need a mentor for technical skills, leadership development, career navigation, or industry insight? Because each of those areas, the specific areas, might lead to having a different mentor. A mentor to help you advance in your technical skills might be somebody who's a subject matter expert versus somebody who's more in leadership development. That might be somebody who's kind of led multifaceted projects or multifunctional projects. And when you get a leader who's led projects that are, across different, even different industries or different skill sets or different competencies, that's a totally different type of skill set that you're trying to develop versus somebody who's more of a subject matter expert. Ask yourself, am I looking for one main mentor or a few people with different specialties in each of those areas? Like one main mentor for developing my technical skills or a few, one main mentor for leadership development or a few. We'll talk about it later, but we are going to again advocate for a board of mentors or board of advisors for your personal career development. While we'll get into that further later, just recognizing that consider how many mentors you want. You can always get perspectives from more than one person. And then write down 2 or 3 goals. Like, I want to learn how to manage a team effectively, or I need guidance on transitioning into product management. Write down some goals that you have for your own career, and that helps you seek out who you might want as mentors.
Okay, so if we've sort of figured that part out, it's important to recognize, as we started out with, even if you don't have a formal structure, you can still go about finding mentors and mentees quite informally, as we've been talking about. And so, from the mentoring, if you're the mentor and you're looking for people, well, so who have you noticed that is a high potential employee? Who are the technical superstars on a weekly or monthly reports or the annual reviews that you see? And I found for sure that when I was participating in the meetings as the executive director, I would sit there and not just notice who's up front briefing, but I paid attention a whole lot to the people that the briefers brought in to help answer questions. And it was very easy to tell while I'm sitting in the meetings with all those brilliant folks. Occasionally, there's 1 or 2 people that everybody defers to. They clearly are the expert in the room. And so it makes it really easy to pick out some of those folks that you might say, that's the person that has obvious natural leadership skills because they already have followers. They already have people who defer to them. And so those might be terrific people that you'd want to reach out to see if perhaps they are interested in being mentored. Finally, you certainly can reach out to the leadership team. You can reach out to your peers when you're a senior person and say, hey, listen, I'm looking to help build leadership. And if you're looking for mentoring for some of your folks that's not specifically in their chain of command, I would be happy to do that and have those folks be identified by their chain of command. It says, these are people who are up and comers, and I would love for them to get mentored by you. So there's ways to reach out, and it's completely informal, but it's not without direction, right? It has clear expectations and clear guidance about the kinds of folks you're looking to mentor, but there's no bureaucracy that's attached to it.
Yeah, you're talking about finding mentees internal to your company or your organization. And if you're a mentee looking for mentors internally, who are the leaders that you observe whose work or management style you admire? Those would be potential mentors, right? You can also reach out after meetings or presentations with a short, genuine compliment. Like, I really liked your point about X, whatever it is that they talked about. Could I ask you a few questions about how you developed that approach? And ask for micro mentoring first. So it can easily be a 20-minute chat, not a long-term commitment. And people, especially senior leaders, are much more likely to say yes to small, specific requests than, can I ask you to be my mentor, and not have real bounds on what that looks like. That's how you informally, organically grow relationships that can turn into mentoring kind of relationships. But Bill, let me ask, what about outside of your company or your organization? How do you find mentees outside of that?
Well, so in professional organizations, there often are mentoring initiatives. And certainly when I have been to the professional organizations, annual meetings and so forth, there have been clear opportunities for growing mentees at those organizations. And I found, actually, since you just talked about it, I often established rather informal mentoring relationships with people who came up to me after a brief that I gave and said, "Hey, I really like that. How did you get there?" And I mean, I think they, I'm not sure how they heard this podcast already, but it happened in the past already with folks approaching me and saying, I'd love to talk to you about how you got to that place."
You mean
Uh,
that was like mentoring in real life?
it was just like that. We should look into that. And so the professional organizations are a terrific place to start. LinkedIn certainly is another great place. Lots of folks posting on there. And so if you see stuff that's posting that interests you, frankly, I'm guessing you would say it works in both directions. If you're a mentor and you see people who are posting things who are either asking questions or are proposing new ideas, and you want to reach out to them, LinkedIn is a terrific mechanism for getting to those folks. If you've created content and you can see who engages with it, there's great opportunities that's created out of those relationships. And finally, certainly I know from our two undergraduate schools, there are significant alumni networks, but I got friends and family who did not go to service academies. And certainly those alumni networks are extremely strong. And I'd say they're often underused, and those can be gold mines for the types of people that you could reach out to through the alumni network. And it's an instant connection for folks.
Hmm. And not just alumni networks from your university, but also could be from previous companies that you worked for. And finding those people, again, leveraging technology like LinkedIn, where you could search for people working now or who used to work for the company that you work for. And that actually gives a connection. There's a connective tissue there. There's a connecting point to say, hey, I realize that you're working for, name the company there, and I'd love to pick your brain about something. That's a way to reach out and just provide some connectivity between you and somebody that you admire what they've posted, or look at their career and admire their career through something like LinkedIn.
Well, it's a terrific mentoring moment all by itself. Certainly these days, people move around between companies fairly regularly, depending on the
Mhm.
industry. And if I could tell anybody anything, it's like, don't ever burn your bridges. And because you never can tell when people will go from one company to the next and then come back if things are working out better someplace else. And so you want to be able to reach out to those networks of folks for mentoring, because that will put you back in connection with folks who might have something to say about it if you decide you ever want to go back to that company. In any case, I can't think of a good reason for burning bridges with companies that you used to work with. And here's a great example of why you certainly don't want to do it. Even if you aren't planning to go back, if you still have good relationships with those people, there's terrific opportunities for mentoring through that.
Absolutely. And so then you've identified some folks that you're interested in being their mentor, or asking them to mentor you in some capacity. What do you do next? How do you reach out?
Yeah, I don't think this is rocket science either, but it's important. Uh, you know, when you're reaching out and you're looking for somebody to help you out, well, start off by being complimentary. Something that you heard or something you noticed about the person and their posts, or something at a conference or a briefing. It's much easier to start off that way, and now people are listening because you just gave them a compliment. And then you can offer up support. Well, I'm really interested in hearing, what you see as your next roles, and perhaps I can help you prepare for them. If I'm reaching out to somebody that I think has great skills and has great potential, it makes it pretty straightforward to give them a compliment and say, I would love to help you grow. I don't know many people who wouldn't love a helping hand most of the time. And, start off, hey, I think you'd make a great, fill in the blank someday. Is that a role you're interested in? Or I'd be open to spending an hour or so with you each month, but it'd be your agenda to build. And, would you like to hear some more about that? It seems pretty straightforward. There's not magic here, but it's just very, very engaging way to get folks interested. And generally speaking, in my experience, people are going to be interested in when somebody senior is offering that kind of assistance.
Yeah. Now, if you're a mentee, looking for a mentor, be specific about why you're reaching out to them. So give them flattery backed by evidence of what you've noticed about their career, right? And make it easy to say yes. Ask for a 20 to 30-minute call, not necessarily, quote, mentorship, unquote. And that really helps kind of smooth the road ahead in developing that mentoring engagement organically. So an example might be like, hey, Bill, I really admire how you've built your career as the executive director. I'm working on developing my own skill set to become the ED someday. And I'd love to get your perspective on how you approached it early on. Would you be open to a short 20-minute chat sometime this month? And Bill can say, yes, I'd love to.
Yeah. And the answer is Bill never said no to that question. So I'm sure that there are folks who would say, you have to say no to more people, but I never, if somebody's out there and is truly appears to be that interested in growing their career, chances are people who are interested in that industry and interested in growing the leadership of the next round are going to say yes to a question like that. They just are.
Yeah. The next reminder that we have for folks is important for both mentors and mentees, and that is to nurture the relationship. So much about mentoring is about developing a relationship. And we've talked about this in the past, but the first thing to remember is just, regardless of if you're a mentor or a mentee, be respectful of the other person's time. If you asked for 20 minutes, be there early, especially if you're the mentee asking for the mentor's time. 5 minutes ahead of time is on time for the meeting. And be respectful of their time. Don't go beyond the time allotted that you asked for. And you'll get that same level of respect in return, right? Also, when you are a mentee, follow up with gratitude and updates to the mentor. Like, I tried what you suggested about that conflict that I was having with a coworker, and it worked. Thank you for giving me that suggestion. Or whatever it is that the mentors helped you with. Follow up with them and let them know how much you appreciate the time that you spent with them.
Now, I can tell you from the mentor's perspective, having people follow up and say, I tried what you offered and it worked, or I tried what you offered and it didn't work, but here's what I'm working on next. Do you have other suggestions? Because they're demonstrating that they were paying attention and they were actually trying to implement things that you said, that will further draw the mentor into the relationship, almost guaranteed.
Hmm. Yeah. And then we also talked previously about having a personal board of mentors or a personal board of advisors. So this is just a reminder, don't rely on just one person for your mentoring. Aim for a small, diverse set of people who can each advise you on different aspects of your career. So it's like your own advisory board. And when you can do so, you're not asking them to get all together at one time. You're asking them individually for advice on a career change that you might be taking or on a particular situation that you might be facing in your career. And when you can get different perspectives, especially when you have common advice given back to you, that's when you know you're headed in the right direction. What else would you like to add, Bill?
I think that about covers it. So, in conclusion, look, finding great mentors and mentees is often a do it yourself experience. While some companies have solid programs internally, often the best relationships grow organically with patience, time, and stand on a foundation of solid intent.
Yeah, Bill, I have to say too, if you are an organization or a company looking to optimize your mentoring, we'd love to chat. We have ideas on how to implement or improve mentoring programs from an organizational level. If if you fall into that bucket, feel free to reach out to us. Our email is in the show notes, or you could reach out to us individually. We're both on LinkedIn and can be found with searching Mentoring IRL via LinkedIn.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mentoring in Real Life. If you have thoughts or questions, feel free to leave us a comment or send us an email, which we've included in the show notes. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate the podcast, and share it with a friend. Until next time, help others climb.